Hello and welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County. Today I have joining me Deborah Murray, our Executive Director of Economic Development Commission and Chair of the Complete Count Committee.
Caldwell
Complete Count Committee, not the overall Complete Count Committee. And I'm going to start with, Deborah, tell me, what is the Caldwell Complete Count Committee?
That is a group of people who represent all kinds of agencies and populations who are assisting in communicating the message of the census and helping people understand what it is and how to accomplish it.
And Deborah and I were talking before we went on air that we're going to talk just general census today. We're going to do another show a little later to be more specific. So I'm going to start with what may sound like a really dumb question to our viewers, but what is the census?
Well, the census is really the decennial census, which means that every 10 years we count how many people there are in our country. And so much is dependent upon those numbers. That is how 2/3 of the federal government's grants and programs are allocated. $675 billion worth of money is allocated on that basis. So it's very important to us because people present themselves in our community for services that are provided for by those funds. But if we don't get the accurate count, when they show up, we still have to serve them. But we're not going to be able to, the funding's not going to come quite so easy. So it's a way of guaranteeing that we know how to plan, how our representatives are, the districts for our national districts for House of Representatives are done. There are just so many things. It's just simply counting the numbers of people in each residence so that all of those decisions can be made.
So, who should complete the census?
Everyone. A representative of every household will complete it. Now, on March the 15th, we will begin across the country receiving, each household will receive, each address will receive a letter in the mail that says, we're inviting you to complete the census. And they're going to encourage you to do that because it's your civic duty to help us understand who's here. And then you will name the people in your household and their ages and the relationship of all those folks. There are no right answers, no wrong answers, no better answers. They just want to know. And then they'll help you even walk through it. But they're going to encourage you to respond on the internet because they believe that'll be the most cost-effective way to do the census this time around.
What if someone is afraid of using the internet or doesn't have access to internet?
Well, that'll be the case with a whole lot of people. We have older folks are especially not internet savvy, and so what will happen is they will be encouraged in that invitation to respond electronically. They'll also be shown how they can, if they have a smartphone, they'll have access to that. And then there is something on there, and they've not shared what that form looks like, but there is something on there. We hope that will allow them to ask for a paper census form.
Privacy, that seems to be a big issue. I mean, a fear when you're completing a form on the internet. I mean, some people are very savvy and they do internet banking and do all their business online, so they're very comfortable with it. Others of us may not be. Talk to me a little bit about the privacy aspect of this.
The census, anybody working on the census is subject to very, very, very high fines and even jail time if they share any amount of information that comes from this. So that's the first thing that folks should know. I think the most common fear is that someone will ask something that, if you don't fill out your census form, online and you don't do it by phone and they don't receive it by mail, at some point someone may knock on your door and they'll have a tablet and some identification, several forms of identification that show that they are a census worker. And then there are a lot of people who might be afraid, well, how can they get into my bank account? Will they ask me for my PIN number, my social security number, or my passcode to anything? If someone asks you for that, they're not a census person. So no, don't give it, and you don't need to worry that the legitimate census worker is going to ask or need any of that information. Now, the most common fear I think that people have these days is that non-U.S. born people need to be counted, but they don't want to be counted because they're fearful that someone might start looking into citizenship. Citizenship will not be a question that is asked. It is not part of the U.S. Census. So we definitely want those people to be counted because they get services, just like everyone else does, that come from the funds that are distributed from the federal government. And so we do want them. We do want them. And there are a lot of other things we can talk about in a minute that it's not just about allocating federal dollars. It's about the different projects that those dollars pay for that serve those people. But there won't be any way for someone to know who's a citizen or not. No immigration officials are going to come knocking on the door. But that's a real fear for people.
Certainly. We've talked a little bit about non-U.S. born citizens. What if someone, English is not their first language? They may not speak English at all.
There are, and I forget how many languages, 50, 60 different languages of help that if you do apply or fill it out on the internet, that you can access those forms in that specific language. So that's quite a bit. And for us in Caldwell County, for the most part, there are Spanish-speaking folks. I know that we have a substantial Hmong community, and we probably have a lot of visitors from various parts of the world. But I would hope that those 50, 60 languages cover all the people who are here.
That is a broad number of languages.
It is. Then there's a telephone number that is on everything that you can call. So I'm hoping that too, that if all else fails, dial the number that's on the form.
Dial the number on the form. So if you don't speak English, there's a way to get the form in your language. And I was also thinking about people who have impairments, the blind. There's also been accommodations made for those folks.
Yes, there are. And again, I think when they do that on the internet, for folks who are hearing impaired, that's one of those ways to make sure that they're cared for. The blind is a little bit different. Hopefully, they will have family members or neighbors who can look at things for them and help them.
And I know folks who are visually impaired also often have computers that are designed to meet their needs.
Yes.
So that may be an even better reason to go online and complete those surveys. Talk to me, we've talked a little bit about it, but why is this so important? We've talked about some of the services. Can you be more specific about
Well, yeah, like I said before, a third of all the federal assistance that comes to the states and the cities and the towns is divided up according to population that comes directly from this. But there's also other things, like housing assistance. The dollars that go to that, the dollars that are devoted to building that type of housing, dollars that go to build facilities for the disabled. You have to know they're there and know where they are to know exactly where you need that service to be provided. And so those are very important things. The more common things that you and I might take for granted every day, for instance, is transportation projects. All US 321 goes right down, right through the middle of Caldwell County.
Right.
And that would be something that is, again, based on census information as a baseline. Some of the other things, it's not just grants for highways and transportation projects, but it's also how do we forecast the future so that we know what needs we will have in 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, because those processes and plans have to be in place now in order to, be reality down the road. Homeland security, that's a determinant, for where are the people, where do we need to protect the people, where do they live? That's a big portion of it. Medicaid, Medicaid is probably the biggest blanket that goes across our country. And that's one of those. Education, lots of education comes through that way, lots of funds for, especially maybe special needs and those kinds of populations. And then all food assistance has that determining baseline. So it's all across the board.
It really is all across the board, and we've talked about how important it is. And I think a lot of our viewers, they'll get their card and they'll go online and they'll fill it out right away. But there are some populations that this is going to be more difficult for. We've talked about senior adults. Are there other populations that we really need to be encouraging our neighbors?
Yes. When we began the Complete Count Committee and had our first census training, there's a list of populations that are hardest to count. And I would start with the elderly, just because they don't have access to the census, to the electronic format that they would like especially to use. Children under 5 years is one of the hardest to count. And the census workers said sometimes, newborns and those kinds of folks just don't get thought of. And I don't know how that's possible, but it is one of the hardest to count. So we're working with the, pre-K folks and all of those who provide services, medical and otherwise, to get that word out to those parents. Non-U.S. born people, just to be able to identify with them in their own language, so that they feel comfortable knowing what the questions are. Those are the hardest to count groups of people. So we're trying to reach far and wide.
Reach far and wide.
That's right.
And really, because it does impact how much money is coming into the county.
It does.
Services. Will we need more kindergartens?
That's right.
I mean, we don't know unless we do the census. And Deborah, we've talked several times about census information, and I think it also is important to point out, while we do this every 10 years, there's some intermediate updates.
There are.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, in my business, for instance, when I'm trying to put a package together for a new business, and they're asking about demographics, questions about who lives here, and all kinds of things, the place I go to is the American Community Survey online, and that is based on census data. It is the census data's every 2 to 3 years update of all the information. So they will go back out and survey and make sure that they're kind of staying in line. Because don't you ever wonder, how could you count something 10 years ago? In the world we live in, as fast as everything changes, how in the world could 10 years ago be relevant to today?
Right.
And so you have to go out there's a 2-year, a 3-year, and a 5-year review, different schedules for all of that. So anyone can go online and see what that information is, and it's pretty much on target, we've found.
And this information, as government employees, we use the information often. Nonprofits applying for grants.
That's right.
They're looking at this information.
That's right.
Students use the information. So it impacts a whole host of people. And again, not going to ask a citizenship question.
Right.
You're looking at ages of people, race, those kinds of things.
Right. Age and race, and then relationships. We live in a community that has, for instance, grandparents raising grandchildren. And so that's one of those things. They want to know, is it a mom and a dad and a child, or is it, a different version of the modern day family? And because all of those things go back into who lives in Caldwell County.
Who we are, and it's a snapshot.
It is. It's a snapshot today that will be updated over time, over the next 10 years.
So I want you one more time to talk about this, if a census worker comes to your house, again, what information will they not be asking?
Well, the first thing they will do is identify themselves properly, and they'll have 2 different badges, as I understand it. So folks should feel comfortable saying, please show me your documentation, if that's a good way to put it.
Right.
And then they will go down the same list of questions that everyone else will be asking in the exact same order. Folks who are interested can go online, and I think I've sent it to you. You may be able to.
We can put it up on the screen.
Right, put it up on the screen, or run a program that just shows people, here are the questions that will be on the census, and how you can do a little homework and kind of be more comfortable with it. When it asks those questions. There's not very many, and it doesn't really take very long. But what they won't ask is, they will never ask for your Social Security number. They will not ask for any money. They will not ask for a donation. It's not going to cost anybody anything. They will never send any kind of a request or ask you for something that involves a political party. So it's not about voting. It has nothing to do with any solicitation at all. And then they will never, ever, ever ask you for your password to something, or your PIN or code, or anything related to a credit card, or your bank information, or any kind of a financial
They're
account.
not going to ask for a payment.
No, they are not. And they're not going to ask you how much of anything. There are no dollars and cents questions that are like that.
And we talked, March 15th is when people should start receiving in the mail.
That's right.
How to do their census. From there, what happens?
There'll be a few weeks. They generally like for it to be finished by all those folks by April 1. And then once April 1 takes place, then they'll start going out to fill in the blanks. And hopefully they'll, come knocking on doors and verifying things. About 2 years ago, they did a address listings, making sure that they knew where all of those places would be, that they would send this invitation to respond. And so that'll be the end of the first phase, and then folks will be out doing the door-to-door. I imagine that's when a lot of the confirmations of things that are the hardest to count people you would think would be homeless people.
Right.
And they will get counted too. And there'll be people out, looking for them and know where they gather and where they are served. And they'll be doing those things too. And I imagine today, we talked about this earlier, I imagine today that if you wanted to be a census worker, that you can still go online to uscensus.gov and look for the jobs that are still available, because they're going to need feet on the ground.
They're probably going to need a lot of feet on the ground, just because it is a huge undertaking.
It is.
And those jobs are temporary jobs.
They are, and they pay $17 an hour. So I've heard that over and over and over. So somebody who's interested in a good part-time temporary job, this would be it, and they guarantee that you will only work during daylight hours.
Well, that's a pretty good guarantee. I started to say, the hours are probably a little bit flexible.
That's right. Well, and if someone knocks on your door and it's dark, they're not a census worker. That's another way to tell.
That's definitely a good way to tell.
That's exactly right.
Because I will be honest, someone knocks on my door and I'm not really expecting them after dark, I'm a little hesitant just to go and open my door.
That's right.
So, yeah.
And you're not alone in that.
And I'm not alone in that.
No.
I feel like a lot of senior adults, maybe even mothers with young children, may not be alone doing that. So, what have we forgotten? What have we missed, Deborah?
I don't think we've missed anything. I'm looking forward to when we talk about the security of things, because there's so many places and layers where this information goes, and folks need to know and understand that they're not at any risk. And it's kind of interesting, to be perfectly honest, of how they guarantee that.
It is really interesting, and we have had a little preview of that just in discussions we've had. It really is fascinating to see where this information goes, and I would encourage people to follow the census online, to go to the census website, because there's a lot of great information out there.
And I also want to say, your first question to me was, what about the Complete Count Committee? That is a great group of people people. I really want to thank them for all of their efforts. We've had folks at lots of different places. The county government, you're helping us do this with the show. And we've had flyers out. The library has got the census information on its receipts stamped. And they're going to have laptops and things like that available so that folks who need some assistance or just need a place to plug in can do that. All of our towns have been represented on the committee. Our education system, Libby Brown at the Ed Center has been phenomenal. And we're going to have a contest in the public school system.
This is probably one of my favorite things, and I forgot to ask about this. Tell us about this contest.
They're having a contest among students, and I'm not running it, so I don't have all the details. But they are going to have students each prepare their top 10 reasons why the census is important to them, which is a great learning experience. And so the winning teacher and the winning student will get a prize, and we're going to print those top 10 reasons from the winner on the bags that are used at the Ag Fair that they have this next month in March.
Right, coming up at the end of March.
Yeah.
So look for those, and if I can get a copy of that top 10, I'm going to use it on the county's Facebook page and anywhere else we can put it, because I just can only imagine what students would come up with.
Well, and think about all the new applications of information in today's world. You know, we live in a big data world, and everybody has access. If they go to the library, for instance, to the internet, and that is where this information is most essential. And when you think about the many different ways data is used, these kids will be the first ones to be able to apply it and see. It'll be more relevant to them than anyone else, the different varied ways that they can use it.
That's true. And when I hear people ask, well, why don't we have fill in the blank in Caldwell County? And the answer could be,
sometimes it begins with that.
It begins with the census. It begins with getting those numbers.
Right. So. We do have, the right density of population in the right areas, and where exactly are they located, and what can we support, and all of those answers can come right straight back to the census.
And in your office with the EDC, what can we support? What businesses?
And we're expected to know that. I all the time have people calling and asking questions that come directly out of either the census numbers or the ACS survey. And so getting a good count is the most important thing.
So really that starts with you.
That's right.
So that's where it starts.
That's right.
Deborah, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing with us and teaching us more about the census and what we can do with it and when it's going to begin. Well,
it's going to begin soon, and so complete your census form.
Right.
Whether it's on paper or on the internet.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.